officially the best female player in the world.
We're not going to leave until we hear from Megan Rapinoe.
We have to be better. We have to love more, hate less. We got to know that this is everybody's responsibility.
And it might fall here to Rapinoe! What a World Cup for Megan Rapinoe!
Yes, we're female athletes, but we're so much more than that. Every single person who agrees and doesn't agree, it's our responsibility to make this world a better place.
This World Cup win is so much more than what was on the field.
Of course, the crowd went wild and made it loud and clear. This team deserves more than just a trophy.
We have a unique opportunity in football, different to any other sport in the world, to use this beautiful game to actually change the world for better. Do what you have to do. Step outside yourself. Be more, be better, be bigger than you've ever been before.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. During my time at the White House, we hosted visits from 86 sports teams, played soccer on the South Lawn of the White House, and hosted the first ever White House Healthy Kids and Safe Sports Concussion Summit. But there is so much more to sports than meets the eye. Sometimes it also speaks to something better in us. Well, Megan Rapinoe is known as a soccer player and a global icon, and her purple and pink hair, which I love, and as an Olympic gold medalist, and as a co-captain of the U.S. women's national soccer team, and as a World Cup champion. She is also, and importantly, a strong supporter of Black Lives Matter, a fighter for Lgbtq rights, a supporter of criminal justice reform, and a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the fight for equal pay. So, Megan, I want to welcome you to our conversation. I have been looking forward to it, and we're going to just jump right in.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. That was such a kind introduction. So many ands. I'm going to have to request you to be on all of my Zooms. It's like,
I would be happy to introduce you anytime. There are a bunch of ands because you have done a bunch of stuff. And we're going to jump right into the fact that athletic activism with both feet on the ground is what you have done. Where does that passion to use your platform to be such an incredible force for good come from?
I come from a pretty small conservative town, but I'm from a big rambunctious family. And something that my mom said to my sister and I'm a twin, so I often refer to my childhood in the we form, but she said to us very young, it was pretty clear from a young age, we were good at sports, we were pretty popular in school. And I just remember her saying basically something to the effect of, just because you're popular, just because you're good at sports, basically doesn't mean anything. Don't think you're cool because of that. And so before I knew what activism was or what using a platform was or what being socially active or any of that meant, I had a sort of deep understanding from my mom, my dad as well, that you will first and foremost be a good person and do what you can, as the late great John Lewis said, what you can with what you can with what you have to, in some way make the world a better place.
A little good trouble, if you will.
Yeah, right? A little good trouble, a lot of good trouble.
As much good trouble as possible. But as you tipped your toe into being an activist, were there people who said, hey, you should just stick to sports?
Yeah. There's still those people. I'm like, are you still saying that to me? I don't think it's landing, but just how important it is. And just, frankly, how much of a life and death matter these types of things are. I really, truly feel that I feel in an incredible place of, privilege being able to be on the national team and being a white woman in this country and having the sort of status that I do. I feel, frankly, it's the very least that I could do is to speak on issues, much less get involved in a more meaningful way.
And how do you navigate that? How do you decide what are the issues that you're going to bring forward?
even if the time is wrong, I probably never heed that warning.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, it always seems like the right time. If there's something that I feel strongly about. I didn't have the word intersectionality. I feel like I owe so much of my own thinking to, the amazing Kimberly Crenshaw and, the fact that she brought us intersectionality. So for me, I just feel like every issue is connected because I think it really all comes down kind of the same thing. Do we value human life in all forms, in all different ways that we, might be able to, see ourselves in, ways that we cannot see ourselves in? I could never put myself, in Black skin and understand, but I can surely believe the lived experiences and what I'm told that those are. And so I can very easily get behind those. So whether it's an immigration issue or an abortion issue or women's rights or LGBTQ rights, it really all seems the same to me.
Well, I have often felt that part of the progressive agenda had to be a reckoning with the fact that, the Black Lives Matter people should care about gender equity. The gender equity people should care about LGBTQ rights. LGBTQ rights people should care about immigration rights, and on. And that there are more of us if we band together than there are of them. And so just from a strategic perspective, we should see how better off we are inextricably linked. Plus, there is kind of the humanity to it, that the empathy, the ability to get inside and look at the life from the perspective that's very different than your own, but which, particularly if we open up and tell our stories, brings us closer together. So I couldn't agree with you more. But I want to go back just a bit because you obviously joined a coalition of 28 players who sued the U.S. Soccer Federation. And I am curious for equal pay, for equitable pay. Mm-hmm. What was the backstory on that? How did that get organized?
Oh, gosh. I feel like this is a story that has been written for many years, many decades to, from the way back to the very first women that ever played on this team, to the Mia Hamms, to the Brandy Chastain, to the Abby Wambachs. And so I think, as the course of the team has gone, we've continued to be incredibly successful. And we gauge our success not only with the wins on the field and the championships that we have, but our impact in the society at large. And I feel we've been incredibly successful both on and off the field. And I felt we exhausted all of the negotiations we could have gone through in collective bargaining over a number of different agreements. We've had a very public approach. We tried to go through the EEOC, and unfortunately, bringing it to a lawsuit was the next best, most aggressive step that we could take in continuing our fight for equal pay, not just for us, frankly. Of course, this is a personal issue for us, and with our federation that it's the only federation that we can play for. But I hope that in bringing such a public fight that we will have not only inspired other women to speak out, but embolden them and given them confidence in their fight as well, because so many women, unfortunately, have to do this alone. We're very lucky that we play on a team, as you mentioned, 28 other women, where we can gain confidence from and really strategize with each other. And not all the women in the world have that opportunity. So hopefully it'll end up in a positive personal success and win for us, but also, as society at large, that we can make a big difference.
Well, talking about equal pay, it really, given the recent death of Justice Ginsburg, I do want to mention the fact that she was an extraordinary, iconic leader, a champion for equality and justice, both as a litigator and then certainly from the bench. And on the equal pay note, as you know, she dissented on the opinion that came before her with the Lilly Ledbetter case. And I think everyone now knows that Lilly Ledbetter sued her employer once she discovered that she wasn't receiving equal pay to her male counterparts. But it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the statute of limitations on her lawsuit had lapsed, and therefore she had no remedy. Well, Justice Ginsburg disagreed with that and dissented in her opinion. But importantly, in her opinion, she also said, look, this should be fixed. And so Congress should address this issue. And with great pride, I would say that the very first bill President Obama signed was a Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which tolls the statute of limitations until you're aware of the discrimination. And I raise this in the context of Justice Ginsburg's death, and because I'm so proud that President Obama signed that bill as his first bill, but also because I think it's so important that we have allies. And I try to imagine, like, what might it be like if you had male sports figure who came to the defense of women in record numbers. And look, I'm not a part of the LGBTQ community, but I consider myself a very strong ally. And I feel, back to the point we were talking about a few minutes ago, Megan, that we all have to be allies. And I'm just curious, as what kind of reception do you get from your male colleagues?
I feel that the reception is warming, especially recently. I think it's absolutely becoming more clear that they're very much on our side. As is usual with people that are not oppressed, equality often feels as if you're taking a step back. But in reality, you're just taking a step off of my shoulders so we can stand on the ground together. So I think that there has been some hard feelings between the two teams. We often get compared against each other. It's often presented as if the men's team is totally unsuccessful and doesn't win anything, and the women's team wins everything, which really isn't the argument at all.
Right.
And so, they've shown a great deal of support lately, which is really important. And to the point of allyship, it's vital. It truly is. Obviously, we have groups that are oppressed in our country, whether it be racially oppressed or gender oppression or discrimination or whatever it may be. And my God, if we could do it alone, we would. We would absolutely solve these problems by ourselves. But the entire system is sort of stacked against us. And so, to have that support is vitally important. It's never wrong to do the right thing. It's never wrong to stand on the right side of history. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It takes oftentimes a lot of bravery and just sort of sheer will and determination.
Exactly. And part of what you're saying is also you've got to meet people where they are so that they can make that leap and realize that this could happen to them too. And that there is something in it for all of us to address this issue. We called on the private sector to voluntarily take an equal pay pledge, to say that they would look at the data to see if there were pay discrepancies. If there were discrepancies, commit to closing the gap. But also importantly, to look underneath it at what are the structural impediments that led to the pay gap in the first place, and try to really look at it from that perspective. And before we left the administration, we had over 100 companies who had agreed to take that pledge, and many of them priding themselves on it. And I'm wondering whether you think relying on that voluntary effort is effective.
I mean, listen, people are all about doing it, and they're serious about it, and they are going to, make significant efforts, and not only, personally, but financially and in the resources of their company. I think that's great. I think that we should try to use every strategy that we can. I think that we should have it legislated, since it's been such a pervasive issue in our country since forever. I think that we should have the voluntary. I think we should put social pressure. I think we should do media pressure. I think any way that you can incentivize, encourage, in some cases, if you have to force people to do the right thing, then we should do that. I think a multi-strategy, every single strategy that we can possibly apply to these issues is the best way to go.
I completely agree. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and you have to go down parallel, multiple paths all at once. Well, Megan, the theme of our conference, Out in the Equal Summit, is the business of belonging. And look, we all want to belong. Everybody wants to, in a sense, feel like there is a place for them. But what does that mean to you, to belong?
I think I feel that very deeply. It's interesting growing up in a country that has put such pride and emphasis on individualism, but being in a team for so long, and knowing the power of relying on other people and leaning on other people, and at times being leaned on in return, I think it is impossible to understate. We are social beings. We know that. Nobody knows everything. everybody has some sort of special talent that they can bring to the table. And so my thought is always, how can we get the very best out of every single individual to get the best for everyone and live in a place that works for everyone and be on a team that can achieve something collectively that you are unable to achieve on your own. And so I kind of wholly reject the individualism in terms of like, this is all me. I have to put it all on my shoulders and I'm going to make it happen.
Well, I will tell you, in my career, I have worked early in my career in an environment where I didn't feel like I belonged, where I was the only woman, the only Black, not the only, but practically the only. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone who looked like me that was in a senior position. And I was miserable. I mean, I was just miserable. And so I spent the rest of my career looking for environments where I could thrive and feel this sense of belonging. So I think it's a really important kind of cause of life, is to feel a place where you are welcome and where you are embraced and that you can bring your full self to it. And so I think people being able to bring their whole selves to their work is how you get the best out of people. I flourished when I finally ended up in an environment where I could talk about what it was like to be a single mother and not think that people were judging me. So this sense of belonging, I think, it's really important. And I do feel, and this comes from our being human beings, that this year of the COVID-19, where so many people are living more isolated, is affecting that. And I was wondering, what's your take on how this COVID-19 has affected our ability to feel that sense of belonging?
Oh, it's I mean, unprecedented is the understatement of the year. It is truly a very bizarre time. Having been so connected before and then having to transition to this sort of online connection, I think has been really difficult. There's something magic, there's something just different of bumping a shoulder or shaking a hand or seeing someone in person and getting that sort of full reality of that person. I mean, it's been incredibly difficult. And, then obviously you throw on top of that the uncertainty and the stress, the collective, grief and mourning that is just hanging in the air because we haven't even been able to process it. We just went past, 200,000 deaths from COVID in this country. It's just horrific. And so I think people are longing for that sense of belonging and that sense of community and togetherness, in a time where it's just impossible to really get that. It's really difficult. I haven't seen my family all year. I talked to them on FaceTime and, other methods, but it's definitely been a challenging time for all of us.
Yeah, I spent about 5 months without seeing my mom, and it's probably the longest I've ever gone in my entire life without seeing her. And she, I suited up in like a hazmat outfit with a face shield and a N95 mask and gloves, unrecognizable in the airport. I finally just reached the breaking point where I had to come home and stayed isolated from her until my test came back repeatedly okay. And she said, "I just want to touch you." And I realized, I'm never around her where we're not hugging, right? And so it was, I think, more painful for her almost to see me and not be able to touch me. And to have gone that long without seeing her was just excruciating. So I hear you. And I guess I'm curious as to what your take is on how this administration has dealt with the issue of making Americans feel they belong, or people feel they belong.
Well, I think it's pretty clear who is being made to feel they belong and who isn't. And if you're white and rich and a man, then I guess you belong for as long as you belong, but that's also tepid ground to be standing on. And then for the rest of us, we frankly don't belong. And that's been made abundantly clear, both in statements and comments made by the president throughout his tenure in the White House. That's in the agenda that they've set forth, whether that's banning trans people in the military or caging people at the southern border or rolling back EPA protections. We're seeing my home state is in California. I just think in terms of everything has been made abundantly clear. There's actually one person that Trump values and that Trump cares about, and that's himself. And he will stop literally at nothing. I've been saying this since the very beginning of the pandemic. He had an opportunity, and we had an opportunity as a country to just say, we're in this together. This seems very much like a bipartisan issue. This is an airborne virus that is taking the globe, a once in 100-year, phenomenon that we've had. And you could have, at the very beginning, politics aside, just said, we're in this together. And we missed our national rallying cry. The effects of that have been devastating, whether that be confusion on things or just outright lies, the polarization of the virus, the anti-maskers. Now you're seeing, obviously, in the wake of George Floyd, you're just seeing, the country just ripped apart in so many ways, which is actually, I believe, the point of the Trump administration. I don't think they're trying to lead or rule or show any sort of leadership.
If at the outset, to your point, Megan, he had said everyone should do whatever the CDC tells them to do. Everyone should listen to Dr. Fauci, a world-recognized expert in this. This is an evolving disease, but as it evolves, we're going to learn more information. And as soon as we learn information, if we change our position, we're going to tell you that, because we didn't say in the very beginning to wear masks. If he had done any of that, I just think of the tens and tens of thousands of lives that might have been saved, not to mention the millions of jobs that we have lost, the loss in productivity, the stress, depression, thoughts of suicide are going up around our country. And all of this comes from this feeling of desperation and uncertainty. And so it is so frustrating to feel, in a sense, helpless, except we're not helpless. And I'm going to shift gears a bit to a nonpartisan conversation, because I want to talk about when we all vote. And I think I chair its board. You are one of the co-chairs. It is the brainchild of former First Lady Michelle Obama, who launched it a couple of years ago. Its mission is simply to change the culture in our country around voting, to impress upon the American people that it is a fundamental responsibility of citizenship, and to, in a sense, back to the theme of meeting people where they are, to say, well, what are the issues that you care about? What are the reasons why elected officials have affected your lives? And this horrible 2020 with the pandemic, the racial unrest, the examples of police brutality, in a sense, it's a really painful civics lesson, too, about why local, state, county, federal elected officials affect both our lives and our livelihood. So I wanted you to have a chance to share a little bit about your perspective with as many of the ands that I added to your plate at the beginning, why you decided to add and co-chair of When We All Vote.
I mean, when FLOTUS comes knocking, you answer the door and you say yes to whatever she's presenting. Obviously, the former First Lady Michelle Obama is just a brilliant woman. And I love the voting thing. It's something that we should all do. It's something that, contrary to what we're made to believe, is not that difficult. I think that we can get involved. We can be more a part of our civic process. I think sometimes people feel, if they haven't, read every newspaper front to back and, read every book that comes out, that they are ill prepared or not in a position that their voice matters, or that they can weigh in on issues, which I think is categorically untrue. Everybody lives in the world and lives in their specific community every single day. You walk out your door, you see people, your mail gets delivered, you walk on streets, you have a police department and a fire department, you have all of these city utilities. So politics is engaging with us, whether we're engaging back with it or not. And I think we have so much power than we're made to believe, and that we actually think. So for me, it's a vital issue, and it's been a huge learning process for me, just obviously we know, what the president does, but I think we've seen more than ever in this pandemic, what are mayors doing? And in the wake of the George Floyd murder and the subsequent protests, what are the mayors doing? What is your state governor doing? What are your city officials doing? What is their job? How are they affecting your lives? Are they making your lives better? Are they making your lives harder? All of these things really matter. Who's on your school board? Who's the district attorney? All of these things play a huge and influential role in your everyday life. And so I think getting people organized, getting people registered. I hope to see just droves of first-time voters coming out and using their voice and being an active participant in our society. I just think that no voice is too small. It's not an every 4 years thing. If it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, you're checking in on what's going on in your community. I believe that only makes your life better. If the citizens in a particular community are active, engaged, talking to each other, working through problems, and engaging with one another and in the civic process, you can't help but think that their daily lives are going to be better because they're the ones that know. We are the ones that know in each of these individual instances what is best for us and our families and our communities.
What do you think is actually at stake in this election? What are the issues that are most important to you? How do you think that women, the LGBTQ community, people of color, what's at stake for communities that for far too long have felt marginalized right now?
I think simply and without any hint of hyperbole, it's a matter of life and death. We have a case coming up in the Supreme Court about the ACA, which is Obamacare. Potentially, millions of people getting their health insurance taken away amidst a pandemic, amidst what will, likely and undoubtedly be a huge financial downturn and a huge hit to the economy. LGBTQ rights, of course, we all know where Pence stands on that, and Trump seems to be obviously going right along with that. He's already rolled back, trans rights in the military and different health coverages for that. The right of a woman to control her own body and, in essence, her own humanity and her own dignity to make choices for herself. When we talk about Roe v. Wade, obviously with, the unfortunate passing of Justice Bader Ginsburg, the court could swing very far right with a 6-3. There's no middle ground. There's no sort of middle vote on that. And that could roll back all kinds of civil liberties. I do believe it's life and death. And I say that without hyperbole. And I get frustrated at people who say, oh, it's going to be okay. And what does the president really do? And this, and I think it's so much worse than we even realize. Trump cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is himself, money, and power. So it's like if he can get more of that, that's the only thing that he's really focused on. And it seems the Republicans have all fallen in line to focus on that for Trump as well.
Yes, they have certainly fallen in line. He has managed to rally his entire party behind his philosophy. And I think about the 100 million Americans who didn't vote in the last presidential election. And if the last 4 years haven't done anything else, I hope it's been a real wake-up call to them, to many of them, that elections do have consequences. Another topic that we were just beginning to touch on a little bit that I know you care a lot about is the criminal justice system. Your brother Brian, you've spoken quite openly about, has been in and out of the system. And why don't you give us a sense of, from your perspective, of what the challenges are and what you'd like to see happen with our current system? And is there a role for the White House involved?
I think probably the biggest hurdle is the fact that the prison system in the U.S. makes money. And it has its roots directly in slavery and directly in white supremacy and Jim Crow and all of the things that follow. And so it makes a lot of money for a lot of people. I also think that there's a societal aspect that needs to shift as well. We have such a punitive system that looks at people who have a drug addiction or had a joint in their pocket, or made a mistake as a younger person, or maybe are hungry and unemployed, and maybe they're homeless, or maybe they have a mental health issue. We're looking at these people as just criminals, period. And the term criminal, Patrice Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, was doing a talk on this before. And I had, referred to people as criminals. That's just sort of the term that we use. And she kind of blew my mind a little bit. And it just sort of hit me like, we shouldn't even talk about people as if they're just criminals. Like it's just this one vast group of people that just committed crimes and they're sort of in a wasteland in America. I think we need a societal shift in the way that we think about justice. I think we need a more restorative justice. I'm a supporter of, defunding the police, divesting from those huge bloated budgets and investing in communities. I think we need to have a sort of reckoning as a country with who we are and what we actually see as justice, and is the current system providing justice for anyone? I don't think it is. And then, obviously breaking that chain of money that is going to be very difficult. The fact that we even have a for-profit prison just blows my mind. We need a full overhaul, but I think it starts with seeing the humanity in each person and realizing that, that drug addict criminal, that's my brother. That's Brian. That's someone who, yes, has made mistakes, but who also, was caught up in a system that did nothing for him in terms of rehabilitating and actually put him on a path to recidivism, if nothing else.
Well, that is exactly right. And when you think about that path to recidivism, what some people forget is that as you're going on that path, you're going to commit another crime. And so really, are we making our society safer by doing what we do with our existing system? I mean, yet again, we have less than 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. Why are we an outlier in this area? Now, what are we doing to reform the police, as you said, to make sure that those who swear to uphold and protect us are actually doing it in a fair and just way? Where's the integrity in the prosecutorial system to make sure that we have checks and balances when people behave inappropriately or illegally or criminally towards the citizens that they're supposed to be protecting? And then when people are incarcerated, what are we doing to prepare them to lead self-sufficient lives when they get out? And on all fronts, we're failing in that effort. And I do think we need leadership at all levels to reform a completely broken system. All right, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get to something a little bit more personal, because anyone who knows you, or certainly even anyone who's tuned in today, Megan, they see you exude confidence. You do. You just, it comes out of you. And I just want to know, have you ever felt like in doubt? Have there ever been those moments where you're not so sure about what's the right way forward? And when you have that self-doubt, what gives you strength? Or if you have it, what gives you strength?
I do think I just naturally am confident. I have been since I was little. There was a brief period from like middle school until I got to college and figured out that I was gay. I feel like in middle school, it was kind of like things sort of change, and then people go through puberty, and that's just the weirdest thing possible for kids that age. And you're trying to figure it all out, and through high school. And so I was kind of awkward through there. I'm very thankful that I'm a twin. I quite literally followed my sister around for years, and just sort of was happy to be in her shadow. And, kind of once figuring out that I was gay in college, I was like, okay, this all makes sense. And now I'm back to my rambunctious little, 5-year-old self running around with the big mouth. But I mean, of course, I definitely struggle. This period in particular has been really difficult to have, my job taken, basically away, and not be able to do something that I love and be around people that I care so much about and, have spent all of my formative years with. It's been very strange. I really do try to lean on people around me and be there for them as well when they're struggling, and just try to be open about it. It's not always comfortable, and I wasn't always like that with my emotions or, mentally if I'm struggling with things, but I try, and I'm, trying to continue to grow as I get older, and just being open with those things and understanding I don't know all the answers, and sometimes even just talking about it, gives me that sense of relief.
And then on a final note, to end on a very positive note, what gives you hope right now? We've talked about a lot of the challenges that our country and our world is facing. What inspires you and gives you hope?
I mean, as terrible as this, period over the last 6 or 7 months has been, there is incredible hope out there. You see millions of people marching in the streets. You see kids, the next generation, they're like so far past where we were in our thinking, even just 5 or 10 years ago. They give me so much hope. I hope that we can see through this pandemic and how terrible it has been handled, that there is a better way forward. These are all people who we've elected into office, who are making choices. This isn't set in stone. This isn't just, our sort of destiny, and that's the way that it is. We can change things. We can choose a better life. We can choose to have healthcare. We can choose to have a more equitable society. We can choose, for our education system to be better. We can choose these things. We can choose affordable housing. We can do all of these things. So I hope people feel that hope and feel that sense that it's there for the taking, and that in order for it to be done, yes, a collective political will have to be in hand, but that people feel that, and they look around and they sense each other in their community, that we do not have to live this way. There is a better way forward. We can start on November 4th and let the people be heard, and continue to let the people be heard for as long as we're able to.
Megan, what a delight. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. I've enjoyed our conversation. I'm certain that the audience has as well. And please continue to fight the good fight. Get in as much good trouble as you can humanly get into in one lifetime. You are a role model for so many, and there will be girls and boys who follow in your footsteps, who stand on your shoulders. And so thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much for having me. You can guarantee good trouble will follow me wherever I go.